Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm really looking forward to this webinar. I really am. My apologies if we seem a little disjointed. Like I said earlier, at a trade show, it was a really, really long weekend. We just did an interview with Global, and I'm a little scatterbrained. I'm not going to lie. We didn't finish till after 10 o'clock last night. So we kind of been all over the place. And I'm going to be drinking a lot of water. My throat is sore, but none of that are excuses. I'm really looking forward to this. I have seen too many people disappointed about bulbs or not understanding bulbs. That this one really means a lot to me, so I'm excited to get going. As always, if we can, if you have any personal questions or just general knowledge, if we can keep that till the end, we will do a Q&A. If it's anything comprehension, I'm explaining something and I missed something or you missed something, you're not able to follow along, jump in right away and we'll deal with that. We don't want anybody feeling lost or not able to follow along. So, you know, let's interrupt them. Brandy, as always, is right there. She's probably got a pumpkin spice latte. It is fall. Did you notice, by the way, Brandy, this is like probably the most minimalistic setup we've needed.
I like it.
Nothing's going to fall over.
That, you know, yes, nothing's going to fall over. And it just proves bulbs can be easy.
Exactly. There you go.
Yes.
You don't need a ton of stuff. So with all that being said, we're going to talk primarily, and we'll obviously touch on other things like we do. We're going to talk about four main things. So when we're looking at bulbs, what are they? And then we're going to talk about when you plant them, and that's going to be really key. How to plant them, because they are specialized. You know, at the end of the day, a bulb's a plant, needs to go in the ground, and it has some specifications like anything else. But bulbs, they're very unique. They're their own little category, and that's why we need to talk about them. I'm going to talk about what to expect, because you take one of these beautiful chrysanthemums home. I did last week for Jenny and my mom. You take this home, you put it in your garden or in a pot, you know what to expect, you know what to do, there it is. Bulbs are very different. If you make a mistake, you won't know for 6 months, and the only way you find out is because it doesn't grow properly. We want to eliminate all of that, and we want to talk about it. So those are the four categories that we're going to try and cover. And first and foremost, what we're going to talk about, and if that literally matches the picture perfectly, that's why I grabbed it. So we're going to talk about what exactly is a bulb. So like I just said, a bulb is a plant. And, you know, I was just saying about chrysanthemums. They're very, very different looking. But go and compare this to a rose bush. Compare a rose bush to a hosta. Compare a hosta to a fiddle leaf fig. Actually, they do come look alike. That example. Then I had on my plate and both got gold leaves.
Wait a minute.
So don't compare that. But not every plant looks alike, and that's a great thing. You know, Brandy and I talk about it all the time, about the diversity and about, you know, having all of these different elements at play. If all you ever had 24/7, 365 in your garden was chrysanthemums, hey, if you like that, fill your boots. It's your garden. Personally, I like the diversity. I want to see different colors at different heights. I want to see something bloom in the spring. I want to see something bloom in the autumn. I want everything to come together. So a bulb, just so that you don't get too intimidated, it's just a plant. And like all plants, like I said, it has specific needs and requirements. So we know there are certain plants that can be more drought tolerant. There's plants that love shade. There's tropical plants. You might be able to put them outside in the summer, but they can't be out in the winter. There's plants that, you know, they need shade. They're not shade tolerant. Every plant has a requirement. The bulb is no different. It's just a matter of understanding and look.
Oh yeah,
Understanding and learning what the requirements are.
we just actually had a comment from Lauren. She says that the stem quality is a little weird. So if you see things moving, just moving the camera a little bit closer to Colin. Hopefully that'll work and then make this sound a little better. Just give me 1 second.
And I'm going to try and project my voice a little bit more. Again, my apologies. I've normally got a very deep, robust voice. Actually, I don't. I normally sound exactly like this, just not as stupid. Hopefully that works. I will try and speak up. Again, my apologies. So when you think of what a bulb is, think of this, exactly what you see here, as an underground storage unit. And everything is going to happen off of this. So all of the energy, everything in there is stored in this part of the bulb right here. And if you look at the slide, you can see that. Okay? And everything is in this bud, it's in the central part. And all of the scales around it. So this paper on the outside, it's a paper bulb, is just a tuning. And it's just that. I'm not going to strip off too much, but here's a great example. So these are now tulip bulbs. That one has its tunic, that one does not. No difference, plant them both, they're both going to grow, but there you go. So you can see some of the differences in there. And this storage unit holds everything the plant needs. It's almost the best equivalent I can give a bulb is think of it like a seed. It needs to go underground to a required depth, and everything it needs to have a healthy propagated life exists right within it. But where most seeds are this big, you plant them and then, 3 days, a week later, you'll see germination. You're not going to get that with the bulb. That's why I don't say bulbs are seeds, but it helps people maybe to put their mind to that. And everything is in there. And when the correct requirements are met, as in it's had a period of dormancy, it has the required food, it's getting the correct moisture, it's warming up, then that is going to trigger the growth. That is going to trigger in here, I need to grow. And you'll see the roots at the bottom, and more roots will come out, and then the actual main stem is going to come out here. That'll start producing the foliage, that'll come up on the side, and then you'll get your big bright flower. Let's just grab these, like your tulips. So that normally is what helps people kind of think of a bulb. It's an underground storage unit, similar in practice to a seed. And the exact definition for a bulb is any plant that stores its complete life cycle in an underground storage structure. Because unlike a seed, every year when it's done blooming, it's going to come back to this, and it's going to go from this, then it's going to come back to this. Once that seed is done and it sends out its taproot and its cotyledons, and then it grows, the seed doesn't exist anymore. It's fed the plant. The seed coat is broken down. The plant's consumed it. Now you have a plant, and that plant might be a perennial, might be a tree, but that seed no longer exists. In 7 years, you put your shovel in the ground and dig it out, this bulb will pop right out. So, that's why they are not a seed, but to think of them like that. The vast majority of bulbs are perennials. The bulbs we sell are perennials. Now, if you dig a bulb up like a garlic bulb and feed it, it's not going to come back. But if you leave it alone, it will come back. So consider bulbs perennials. And they're normally shorter-lived perennials. And when I say that, I don't mean I think a lot of people who've done bulbs, or in the spring, you'll see it. And you'll see a lot of tulips, but it's just foliage, no flower. Now, that'll keep putting out foliage year after year after year, but it just doesn't have the flower anymore. At that stage of the game, a lot of people replace their bulbs simply because there's green happening all over in the spring. Our grass is greening up, weeds are coming out, trees are budding out, our early perennials are coming up. You can get annuals, but growing bulbs primarily, the vast majority of people are growing them for flowers. In the case of hyacinth, flowers and fragrance. You want to attract those pollinators. So a lot of them can be, somewhat short-lived, between 5 and 9 years. Some of them will go longer. You get people saying, I've never replaced my tulips in 20 years and they're still blooming. So again, that's something depending on conditions and everything else. So in a nutshell, that's what a bulb is. So we're going to move on and we're going to talk about when to plant bulbs. And now is when we plant bulbs. The amount of times in my career, I've had people come up to me when I was a landscaper and say, oh my gosh, I love my neighbor's yard. Can you get me some of those flowers? And we say, well, yeah, we can, but not this year. And they look shocked. They're like, well, I want those. And I'm like, I know, but they have to be planted in the fall, come back in the spring, and they're disheartened, but then we would catch them up. The next year they would have their tulips. And a lot of times what happens is everybody is gung-ho for the garden in the spring. We know that. We're gardeners. We get it. And then autumn comes and we're busy and kids are going back to school and we're not really thinking about the garden. We're thinking about putting the garden to bed and we miss bulb season. And then next spring we're like, I miss my tulips again. And I hear it all the time. People coming in and going, where are your tulips? And we're like, they won't be back until September. So that is why we're doing this. That's why I spoke to Tracy on Global this morning about it. We don't want people to miss out. So right now is when you plant bulbs. They need a period of cool dormancy. Like they want to go in the ground and they want to freeze solid. And that is part of the reason, like I said, that triggers the growth. That's one of their requirements is the dormancy. So some garden centers go, I use that term very loosely. I'm talking big box stores, but they have a garden center, so whatever. They might bring them in early. Now the problem is, if you put a bulb in too early, and by early I'm talking beginning of August, it's not going to grow, it's going to sit there. Now if it gets too much moisture around it, it's not growing, it's not absorbing moisture, the roots aren't pulling it up. It can start to rot underground. So you really want to put your bulbs in. You want to push them a bit late. Now is great. We know it's cooling down. You know, we put the extra blanket on our bed. We're not into big, thick comforters yet, but you know, that's what we're getting to. So the best time to plant, the plant range you're looking is between September and December. Honestly, the best time is September to November. There's always cheats. I've planted bulbs in this much snow before. It's not fun. Cold hands, it's mucky. You're wet because you're kneeling down in the snow. But you know, hey, we're doing a bulb planting job. We got an early snowfall. We couldn't stop, and it's not going to hurt the bulb. That's the most important thing. If you're a gardener or a landscaper, we don't really think about the environment as in, oh, is it good for me? It's, will it hurt the plant? If you're putting down sod, planting a tree, doing bulbs, you don't look outside and go, oh, it's rainy, I don't want to get wet. You go, oh, is it too wet to put down the sod? Because a bit of rain, putting down sod, you can't ask for better. You're immediately watering your sod. Too wet, you're making a mess and you can damage your sod. So it's all about balance. So I've done it in the snow. You can do it in the frost, do it after the frost. It's not going to hurt the bulb, because I know a lot of people go, oh, it's too late. We already got hit by a frost. It's not too late for the bulbs. One year, we didn't have snow, but the ground was frozen solid. I couldn't get my trowel into the ground. Whack, and the shock went down my wrist. And I'm not kidding, I wish I was, but I literally had my trowel in a hammer. I ended up breaking my trowel without having to hammer in. But once I broke that first half inch, the soil beneath it was light and loose, and I could get my bulbs in the ground. So now is a good time to plant. You're not too late with bulbs. Once you start, I mean, you probably won't be able to find them, but maybe you forgot to plant them. Maybe you bought them, you got the phone, you forgot. Once you start getting into January and February, and you look at planting them, the cold period might not be long enough. You can do it, will live underground, but you might not get the growth that spring. So it's not always ideal. Like I said, your best window, September to November, great time to get them in the ground. So how to plant the bulb? So we've already discussed they need to go in the ground and they need to go underground. So that is key. And like I said, they do have planting requirements. And one of the requirements is deep underground. Now, deep, I say that because that's how a lot of people word it. But deep is a very, very subjective term. I'm not saying you're not digging down 3 feet. It's not like planting a tree. You're not doing a massive excavation, but it's also not like a seed. Again, that's why I don't want to keep saying that like it is a seed. It isn't. But with a seed, when you push a seed in, you want it to be, this far from the surface of the soil. That's not going to do a bulb any good. They want to go down. And with the depth, there's no one size fits all. They're not the same size bulb. I grabbed the double one. I should have grabbed the single. That's not the same size bulb at all. So they're going to have different requirements. Now, there is a guideline that you can use. And all of the bulbs that you buy like this, they do all have instructions on them. Okay, but we're touching on broad strokes. Again, as always, I don't have time to discuss hyacinth separately, allium, garlic, tulips. So we're just going to do broad strokes, but there are instructions. And as always, any questions, ask at the end, DM us, call us, all of that good stuff. But a good rule of thumb is when you're planting a bulb, you want the depth to be 2 or 3 times deeper than the bulb is tall. So what that simply means is you have a bulb, okay, put another bulb on top of it that's twice as deep, 3 times as deep. That's how deep you want to dig your hole to put a bulb in. So you can dig your hole, you put a bulb in, you measure it up, you go, ooh, that's a little high, you dig out a bit more soil. Oh, that's too deep, it's 4 times higher, push a bit more soil back into the hole. So it's a good rule of thumb to kind of do that. Another trick, you're going to use your trowel, take your trowel, measure your bulb against it. You go, oh, I need to be that deep for my daffodils. So when you dig in your hole, you put your, okay, perfect, I know I'm deep enough. Okay, so it's a good rule of thumb, and that works on all of them, because all of the bulbs, again, and we're going to talk about mixing and matching. I'm not going to open the bag, but look at the size of a small crocus bulb to a daffodil. Okay, now a lot of people like to plant daffodils and crocus to get a great blend of color. How do we do that? We're going to get into that.
Oh, and George asked, is that the same for pots?
Yeah, it's the same idea for pots. Pots can be a little trickier, simply because if your bulb, if this is a pot and you put your bulb too close to the edge, it can actually get hit too cold. But if you're doing a pot and you're putting it in cold storage, like a garage, where it is going to get the, excuse me, sorry guys. You're going to put it in the garage where it's going to get cold. So it's going to get the dormancy, but it's not going to get the extreme. It's not going to get to -40 with the wind hitting it. Yeah, it's the same thing. They want to be deep. There's a few reasons for the depth. One is, especially when they're outside, you don't want that first 2 inches, like I was saying when I had to hammer my trowel in, really freezing them solid. They don't want that. The second is when you plant your bulb and the stem comes up, if it's too close to the top of the soil, there isn't enough structure to hold the stem. So it comes up and falls over. It needs that structure to hold it up, because the stem of the flower is going to be planted here and it's going to taper up to the bulb. If that's right at soil level and it grows, it's going to come up and there's a bigger chance it's going to fall over. So you want it a bit deeper to protect it. And yeah, that applies to pots as well. It's probably one of the most common ones you'll see in a pot is tulip, because they're nice and short. I mean, they are also a huge favorite, but probably half the height of that. So you can use a more shallow pot, like a 10-inch dish, get the tulips in, they're sitting on soil, that much soil, boom. You get your soil up to the top, you get your tulip. That's often why you'll see tulips, or did I grab some? Oh, I did. Perfect. You'll see the smaller daffodils. So again, that, and you can see that that one's more comparable to a tulip size.
Oh,
So that's why you'll see them. Hyacinth, you'll see forced in a glass jar and stuff like that. But yeah, a lot of times with bulbs in a pot, you do still want them deep. You're not sticking them just below the surface. And another thing I see a lot of people do is they'll take a hole, especially if they're using a bulb planter. Okay, these things are pretty good. They're like cookie cutters. You do that, you lift it up, you do that, and it drops the soil for you. Okay, so a lot of people use those. They'll go and they put the tulip in and they backfill the soil, and then they go over here and they do it. That's great. Again, I'm never going to tell anybody what to do in their garden. I'm going to tell you how to do your garden successfully, I'm not going to tell you every tulip needs to be in a group of 5. Maybe you don't like that, so why would I tell you that? You do them how you want to do them, but they can go in groupings. I personally love my favorite thing is a mass planting or a big clump of daffodils coming up everywhere. So when you plant them, you can dig a hole. You're going to use your shovel and you bam, 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 and you dig a nice deep hole, almost as if you were putting in a tree to the correct depth, smooth it out, and then you stick all your daffodils in. And you place all your daffodils, then you backfill, and you got a big clump of them, and it looks awesome. So you really can. You can do individuals, you can do rows, you can do groupings. However you like it to look. I know some people try and mirror the annuals, or they'll follow the flow of their perennial bed, or they'll have them going up the walkway to the house. Tons of different ideas. Again, they are a plant, so that's an aesthetic thing. So I just want you to know that you can do individuals, groupings, or row planting. They're going to look great. And mix and match with your colors and styles. So I've said this before. If I came out and I was wearing a bright orange shirt and a red jacket and white pants, people will be like, "Oh my God!" Like you clash a little bit there. But you put it together with flowers and chrysanthemums and annuals and bulbs, it just looks amazing. It's bright and it's colorful. The pollinators love it because you're hitting all the spectrums. Look at that. Even that, just bicolor. Okay. Don't get me wrong. Again, if you just like white, go for it. Do what you like. I know some people who do like monochromatic themes. So they'll do, the white daffodils and the white tulips, and they focus everything, white snowdrops. They do all of the whites, but they have a variety. But if you just like white tulips, just do that. But I'm just saying you can mix and match. We actually sell, so I grabbed these tulips, and we do sell loose tulips. The box is marked, and you can open a bag. And a few years ago, Harry, my son, wanted to decorate my dad's grave, and he came and he had his own money to spend, and he got the paper bag, and he was like, "Would your dad, would Brenda like it if I mixed and matched?" And I was like, "Have fun, he would love it." My dad was an avid gardener. I got it and I passed it down to Harry, and Harry just grabbed, I think, one of every color, as a kid will do, planted them all. Do you know what? They came up in the spring and they looked amazing. It looked bright, it looked fun. It looked like a kid was involved. You want more structure. You want bright daffodils on either side of your doorway. Do that. There's no right or wrong answers here at all. But do consider the area in the spring. I have seen it before where people plant their bulbs and they plant them. I know that this is an annual, but they'll plant them right next to a perennial. Well, these guys come up and then the perennial starts coming up, and now they're competing. And flowers can get lost, and often it's the bulb that suffers, not the perennial. So just consider that in the spring, where you want them, some environmental concerns, and have a look at that. We're going to talk a bit about sun and shade when we get to it, but just be aware, one of the bulbs will tell you sun and shade right on them. And just be aware for that, because in the spring, there's no leaves on the trees. So that area might be full sun. Now, if you're planting close to a house, that's not going to change. It might be full shade. So just be aware that environments change. The sun comes in a lot lower in the winter. In the spring, it's constantly creeping up. So if you're planting your bulbs in November, and you're like, "Oh yeah, there's no sun. This is the shady area." Then come May, you're like, "Oh my God, it's full sun." You just want to keep an eye out for things like that. Keep an eye out that, again, in November, you're like, "Oh my God, this area is full sun." But in the spring, your tree is leafed out, now it's full shade. Okay, so there are mitigating factors, but a lot of times bulbs are going to come up before the trees leaf out. So the great thing is, a lot of bulbs can do sun and shade. The foliage is coming up and it's just getting blasted by the sun because there's no foliage on the trees, and it does amazing. There's downfall with that. After the flowering, you've still got the foliage. Well, now the tree has foliage, so that foliage isn't absorbing, it isn't getting the photosynthesis it needs to send the energy back down into the bulb. So just some things to be aware of. Again, not to scare anybody away. If you look, a lot of them will say the shade tolerant sign on them because in the spring, there isn't a lot of things on there. So this one is the more specific depth chart. And I just put that on there so that if you guys refer to our blog, you've got something to look at. I'm not going to talk about that too much. It's literally, as you can see, right there for you. So, you know, you look at, let's go to the tulip. Again, it'll be like 6 inches. Can you measure that? Yeah, probably 2 inches. If you're on top, you got a 6-inch depth. Okay, so again, that's that rule of thumb. You look at the small crocus bulb, 2.5 inches. We look at our crocus bulbs, yep, there's probably 3 times the depth. So again, that rule of thumb works, and that's what you want to look at. That's a slightly more accurate chart if you want to reference it. But that was just to let you guys know about the depth. Again, they're not seeds. You know, if this is your soil level, you don't want it sitting right there. You need to go deep, too deep. And the main thing that will happen is the bulb might not be able to reach the surface. So it's expanding its energy. It's pushing out its energy, and the leaves are growing up. Now, if they don't eventually break the surface and start getting photosynthesis, the energy in here is depleted. Like any plant, it needs to constantly replenish, whereas getting the replenishment from light. So you plant your daffodil 5 times deeper. Well, if you dig it up, it may have grown. It may be this tall. It didn't break the soil. So that's another thing. You can go too deep. You can go too shallow and too deep. Not an exact science. Okay, so if you miss it by half an inch, an inch, if you plant and your hole is slightly like that, you're probably going to be okay. Just saying, you don't want to dig a hole this deep and put your daffodils in it, and you don't want to nestle them just below the soil. So that's the only reason I included that. How to plant bulbs in a grouping. So again, if you look at that picture, the aesthetic, I like the aesthetic that they look better as a group opposed to individuals. One tulip sticking out the ground, not my cup of tea. But again, if that's you, you do you, man. I think they look better mixed together. I like seeing big groupings. That's why I didn't just grab one chrysanthemum, I grabbed 3. That's why, you know, we'll put houseplants up here and we'll have some cactus and succulent together. Groupings, I think they always look better. Again, it's the diversity, it's the height, it's the color, the variety, there's all kinds of things. And you can go tighter than you think. And I'm saying this because I've done it. I've done it numerous times. So you'll look and it'll say, oh no, your daffodils should be this far apart. Give them that. Because the bulb itself is never going to get much wider. You're growing in the ground, the roots are going to go deep and the stem is going to come straight up. It's not like a perennial or an annual that you're growing from seed. You want to have those. We had a little problem with some of our seeds this year. They got planted too close together. As a result, the veggies suffered. Hey, no problem. Lesson learned. Next year we'll space them out a bit more. That bulb, if you dig this bulb up in 5, 7, 9 years, 1 year, it's going to be about that size. It's not going to change. So you don't want them touching. Again, trap moisture. You want soil between them, but you can literally put them that close together, and you're going to get that, wicked sound, almost like in a vase of bulbs coming around. So you can have a lot of fun with that. And if you mix and match different species, be aware of the depth. So if you're going to plant crocus or muscari, which are a much smaller bulb, and you're going to plant them with daffodils, it's a great look. You get yellow or white daffodils with this. One of my favorite looks is the muscari. We didn't have any, otherwise I would have grabbed some. I didn't see any, I should say. The muscari is the great hyacinth. And it's a small one, about this big, and it's got tons of little, little round flowers, and they're a bluish purple. Well, that goes amazing with a bright yellow daffodil. Thing is, I dig the hole, and I put my daffodil in, and then I put my muscari bulb next to it. They don't want to be at the same depth. So what I have to do is I have to backfill on my daffodil, bring that height up, and then I put the muscari in. And I want to try and remember the spacing of my daffodils because in an ideal world, I don't want my muscaria on top. Now, they will grow around each other. If there's a rock in there, the daffodil will come around to get to the top. So you don't have to worry too much about that. Again, I've done it. I put bulbs in. Can't remember where they all are. I can't see through the ground. And they always do great. So it's really the depth you want to focus on. It's not so much the spacing. They will do well when they do it. Yep, again, depth is a crucial element. And then one thing you want to look at as well, when you're planting them together, is look at the height, because if this is a walkway and you put daffodils and crocus together, and it should say right on them, so the crocus are going to get to 10 centimeters or 4 inches. The daffodils are going to get to 35 centimeters or 14 inches. So if you do it and you put the daffodils in front of the crocus, you might not see the crocus. So always check out your height, because you're going to want to, again, you do a grouping, you put them all in, but maybe you want to keep your daffodils to the back of the hole, and you want your muscaria, your crocus to the front of the hole, so that again, you've got that sense of depth. It's not going to hurt the crocus to be behind the daffodil, but you might not get to enjoy them as much. So always keep an eye out for that, and when they come up, and you might want to look at also when they're going to bloom. I see some people who are like, oh, I want to do crocus and allium. I didn't grab an allium bulb either. And allium bloom very late in the season. Crocus bloom very early in the season. So your crocus comes up, flowers, looks amazing, dies back, then your allium comes up and flowers. So they're going to look great individually, but you're not going to get that bloom time together. So you're going to want to keep an eye out for that as well. So this is the part I was talking about, the bulbs, sun versus shade. So again, I don't want anybody to be too intimidated by this. I'm sure a lot of you have driven by somebody's house and seen tulips growing under a tree. Now you look and they say, oh no, tulips love sun. But here, lets you know that they can take a bit of shade. And that's exactly why, because they come up while that tree is leafed out. They're absorbing all the photosynthesis, or absorbing all the light and undergoing photosynthesis, I should say. But that energy is being expanded immediately into the roots and the flowers. Once that flower is deadheaded and you have the foliage, that foliage is now pulling energy back down to our battery, back down to our storage cell for it to come up next year. So you just want to make sure you're not planting something in dense shade or something that likes it a bit shadier. You're not putting it fully exposed or in the sun. So that's kind of a rule of thumb. Again, I'm not intimidating anybody. If you're unsure, always refer to the actual plant itself. You'll get your guidelines there. Those were just examples to help you guys. So what do you expect? We've done all of this work. We've done the work in the fall. And again, bulbs are great. I've done bulbs at this time of year. And you're out and you're planting and you're spending all day and you get up and you're dirty and your knees hurt and you look and it looks like you've done nothing. The garden hasn't changed at all. In the spring, you're out there, you're all day, and the sun's on you and you're dirty and your knees hurt. You turn around and you got your tomatoes, you got your plant pots, everything looks amazing. The birds are singing, and you're like, yeah, I rock. This you look and you're like, oh, nothing. Okay? So what you expect is you get the joy later. The bulb is the ultimate gardening thing, but late gratification. You do the work now, you reap the benefits earlier. First thing you're going to get is early signs of life. The moment they can break dormancy, I think everybody's seen bulbs coming through the snow. Bulbs start coming up, we get a little bit of snow, and then they push through. We've seen crocus blooms in the snow. It looks amazing. It really is that, image people have when they think of bulbs. But when I say very early, early is subjective. If we have an early spring in April, you can see signs of life there. We have a much later spring where we're getting a lot of snow, the ground is still frozen. The bulbs, I've seen bulbs come up end of May, June that are considered early bloomers. It all depends on the weather patterns. When I'm saying early, I'm not talking calendar, I'm meaning before a lot of other things in your garden are coming out. So just remember that. The bulbs are getting their moisture when the snow and the ice melt. That's what's feeding them. So that's basically what's going to trigger them to grow and get out there. Now, it's a very dry spring. The ground's frozen solid, but we didn't get a lot of snow and moisture. You might want to get out there and water them as it warms up. That will help trigger them. So they do want to have that watering. And then the warming of the ground, as that's creating the moisture by melting the ice and the snow, as it warms up and the ground starts breaking, that's going to trigger that dormancy. So these are all the signs you're looking for, like, ooh, the days are getting warmer and lighter. Things are starting to melt. And I'm one of those people, I've probably got 40 pictures in my phone from last April of bulbs, but they're not aesthetically pleasing. It's literally tulips this big, a little pointy leaf. And I'm like, exactly that picture on the slide. And I'm like, oh yeah, it's like in my garden, and I'm super happy about it. So that's what you'll see. Like I said, different bulbs have different bloom times. Crocus and snowdrop will come up earlier. Alliums and some tulips will bloom later. Again, that's great for diversity. You can stage your bulbs so you don't get a swath immediately, and then while you're waiting for your annuals or your perennials, you got nothing happening. You can play with them, and again, that's where the diversity is key. And they are often the first signs of life. A lot of times, bulbs will be breaking the ground before even the weeds are green. So that tells you how ready they are to grow. The amount of energy they're storing in here, ready to pop up, that's where it comes from. Again, the next slide, it's just a very basic one to show you your early, your mid, and your late bloomers. Again, that's a guide. If we're having a really late spring, stuff might start coming up together because it's been dormant for too long. If it's a really drawn out spring, things might be really spaced apart. So again, as we always say in gardening, you want the exact science, that's botany. You want the art, that's the horticulture. We're bringing you the horticulture. So again, and what to expect, bright early garden life, color, height, and vibrance, pollinator encouragement. So if it's starting to get warm enough where you're seeing blooms and you're seeing life, a lot of times the pollinators are waking up and those bees are like, oh, I'm hungry. And like I just said, a lot of times we can see life in crocus and snowdrops before even the dandelions have got growing. Those pollinators see that, they hit your garden, well, pollinators are going to come and they're going to keep checking you out. So it's a good way to get those pollinators, especially if you're planning on growing tomatoes and veggies and things that need pollination. Bulbs are a great way to do that. No heavy lifting. All of that work I just said, when you're done after a day of bulb planting and you're like, this sucks, I didn't do anything, but I got all the dirt and the pain and everything sucks. My shoes are filled with soil. But then in the spring, you're like, hey, I didn't do anything. Look at all my flowers. At least that's my attitude. I walk around my garden a lot doing that. And it adds more diversity. And again, more diversity encourages more life, makes your neighbors jealous. I'm just kidding. You don't want to make anybody jealous. But it makes your garden more diverse. It adds more beauty. It brings more elements in. That's what it's all about for me, is a broad range of things happening in the garden, more diversity, more pollinators, right? So what we're going to talk about now is the bulbs, care, and maintenance. So they require regular watering, and that is after you've planted them as well. Again, you don't want to be flooding them. There's nothing actively happening, but you don't want them to desiccate either. So if there's no rain, you put them in. We get a beautiful late autumn like last year. It was nice and dry. The trees went through their whole colors, which in Calgary is yellow, but they went through all of their yellows. And Brandy's just loving it.
I'm swooning. I love it.
Yeah, Brandy does love her autumn. But if we get that, great. Love it. I mean, autumn is a season unto itself. However, if it is really, really, really dry, these guys can start desiccating because, as we know, soil can pull moisture away. So doesn't hurt while you've got the hose out and watering your mums. maybe you got some late veggies happening, you haven't had a frost yet. One of the areas that you dig your bulbs in, again, you don't want to flood them, you don't want them sitting in water, just make sure that they get a good drink. I get messages all the time. Family members have called me, oh my God, I did my bulbs and it snowed. What do I do? Nothing. Right, they're fine. They like the bulbs, remember? They like that dormancy. They're very, very, very hardy plants. Now, if they're up full bloom and we get some snow, obviously that can damage them, but that can damage your tree. There's not much we can do about that. But your bulb is growing and there's a frost, it's going to power through. You got that light dusting of snow, even the small crocus will come through the snow. So they are really hardy, so don't worry about that. Fertilizing, again, this is an underground storage unit. Bulbs don't need the amount of fertilizer, say a tomato needs. They like it, but you don't have to do it. So don't over fertilize, and an all-purpose or a flowering fertilizer will do them great. If you have an all-purpose or a flowering, cut it 50%, and they'll do fine with that. You do not want to over-fertilize them. You can't push any more flowers out of them. Like I said, they're a perennial. We've already discussed fertilizing with perennials. So you don't want to force it too much. Deadhead, just like you would anything else. I don't even have any deadheads on my chrysanthemums. You just pop that seed pod off. You don't want developing seed. You want the energy to go back into the bulb. Now, mistake I see a lot of people do, the flower finishes, they go out, they take the whole plant, they cut it back to the ground. Bad move. Get rid of the deadhead, but as long as that foliage is green, it's getting photosynthesis. Oh, keep saying that today. It's getting sunlight and undergoing photosynthesis. That photosynthesis is plant food, it's energy. That's going into the bulb. It's not going to send out more flowers, but it's going to store that energy, get it through the summer, get it through its dormancy, and send out another flower next year. You cut that off, all of the energy that the leaves got, they put into that big, bright, beautiful flower. Now, they're putting that energy in the bulb. You cut that back, you're not replenishing the energy in here. And I think that's why a lot of people go, oh, my bulb's only lasted 2 or 3 years, because you haven't allowed it to recoup the energy that it's put out. So when the foliage is finished, you'll know the leaf will turn a sickly yellow or a white, and just a gentle tug, and it'll pull away. It'll just come out of the ground, boom, you're done. Your bulb is now dormant again, and it's good to go for the next year. And they are a short-lived perennial, like I said. Once they stop blooming, you might want to change them. I know some people in my gardening career, every year they wanted an exceptional showing of bulbs. Every year they would dig all of their bulbs out, compost them, and put new ones in. That's a ridiculous expense. If you want it, you got the money and you want to go for it, you know, we got these ones are ridiculously popular. I got to show you these. Jenny loves tulips, Jenny loves peonies, and we have double peony tulips.
What?
Brandy apparently also loves tulips.
That's beautiful.
It is beautiful. And that deep color with the green tulip leaf in the spring, forget about it. All day. I'm not a big fan. I'm not a big fan of peonies, but I love those. If you want those every single year, just guaranteed magnificent. Yeah, replace them, but you don't need to. You're gonna get, even without very good care, most tulips have got enough in them to give you 5 or 7 years. It's a waste of your time and money. They're a perennial. You wouldn't dig your hosta out every year. You do not need to dig them out. It is a thing we got to ask, oh, I need to change them every year. No, they are not manual. They are a perennial. So, some tips for long and happy and healthy bulbs. Squirrels love tulips, okay? Plant them with daffodils. Again, diversity is key. Daffodils actually have a toxin in them. Animals will not eat daffodils. You put them together, all they can smell is the daffodil. They can't stay away from your tulips. So it's a great idea to companion plant your crocus and your tulips with daffodils. Daffodils, they come in whites, oranges, yellows, there's bicolored flowers, there's a ton of diversity. You plant that bulb, in with your other ones, and you're going to help keep the squirrels away. Watering is key. I know I've already touched on that, but I have to put that in as a tip. People tend to think, oh, the bulb has everything. It's got water and everything in here. It doesn't. They need to drink. If they're not getting the moisture, we have to give them the moisture. Bone meal. That's good. Bone meal. Oh, we dropped something.
No.
I had literally nothing and we lost something. Bone meal is great. It's a slow release fertilizer. When you dig your hole, a handful of bone meal in, nestle it in. It's fantastic. Again, it's often overlooked. People don't think about it. I know people will put chicken wire down. They'll plant their tulips and they'll roll the chicken wire out on top of their tulips. You want to lift this up pretty quick. As the bulbs grow, they may start growing through. You try and lift your chicken wire off, you're going to damage it. You don't get your chicken wire off, it can start cutting into the stem and damage your bulbs. So be really careful using it. It will work, squirrels can't get through it, but you want to lift it off pretty quick. Make sure they're planted, and things like this, I am not being condescending at all. I've seen it too much. Make sure they're planted right way up. Have a quick look. They've got a base plate and they've got a bud. Base plate and roots down, bud pointing up. That's all you need to know about that. I see a lot of people that think that this is the root. I've seen it happen too many times, and I've seen bulbs go in upside down. It tends to not work. I'll just leave it at that. Plant your chrysanthemum upside down. Let me know how it looks for you. It's not going to be that great. So with your bulbs, you always want to make sure your base plate, and it's real easy. Base plate tends to be flat. It should sit nice and flat in the ground. So you want to do that. And I get people go, oh, which way do I want it to face? Doesn't matter. As that comes up, it's gonna straighten itself. So it's not gonna come up like that. It's gonna come up nice and straight. And then it's gonna find where the sun is. And a lot of times you'll see certain bulbs. Daffodils are a great one. In the morning, they're facing east. As the day goes, they start tracking to the west. It's, you're not going to watch it. I mean, time lapse is good, but they tend to track the sun. So don't worry about the way your direction is. There's obviously a million more things I could have said. I could have talked about so much. I'm going to leave you with one last thing, and that's blood meal. This goes great. If you hate daffodils, and I know people who do, and you love tulips, blood meal works great. Bone meal goes into the hole to act as a fertilizer. Scatter blood meal on the top. The smell keeps the squirrels away, and it's a great slow release, low feeding fertilizer. Just remember, it is a fertilizer. It has nitrogen. That can help feed the leaves when they come up. Healthy leaves, we know what that's doing. It's putting energy in, so it's going to help a bulb come out. So that wraps it up. A big thank you to everybody being here. Thank you to Tracy and Global for talking to us about bulbs today. Like I said, you don't have to take notes. This is going to go up as a blog post on our website, and you can reference it. You can ask us any questions.
Yeah.
And let's start with some questions right now if we have it.